this morning political analyst Mark Jones with Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Mark, always great to see you. Let's jump right in here. Republicans maintain their dominance over Texas politics in the midterm elections, growing their majorities in both the State House and the Senate, and hanging on to every statewide elected office. Just how conservative can voters expect them to go this session, both on fiscal and social matters?
Well, I think we can expect a conservative session. Republicans view the election of past fall in 2022 as a mandate. They increased the number of Senate seats by 1 and their number of Texas House seats by 3. And you mentioned won all the statewide races, even in the tightest race, winning by slightly less than 10%. So there's going to be quite a bit of pressure from the Republican base to enact several policies that the conservatives want to see. That's going to be blunted somewhat, though, by moderates who don't want the party to go too far, which they view it sometimes does when the base begins to have its way.
And Mark, we know Texas certainly made a lot of national headlines since the legislature last met in 2021, not necessarily in a good way. Of course, the Uvalde school shooting, the outlawing of abortion, critical race theory, and LGBTQ plus issues in school. We expect some of those social issues in particular to be front and center starting today. How can we expect to see all that play out?
Well, right. As you mentioned, after the Uvalde massacre, there's a host of bills designed to implement gun control legislation, ranging from very sort of consensual common sense reforms to more controversial reforms. Those include banning the sale of high-capacity magazines, closing the gun show loophole that allows people via private sales and gun shows to buy a firearm without a background check, raising the age to purchase an assault rifle from 18 to 21, adding a waiting day period for assault rifles. None of that legislation, though, is probably going to see the light of day, so I wouldn't expect any gun control legislation to pass this session. The same is true in regard to abortion. There are a host of bills designed to make the current relatively strict abortion legislation that we have in Texas more flexible. Right now, a woman can obtain an abortion only if her life is at risk. There are bills that would add exceptions for rape, incest, fetal abnormalities, or through 6 weeks. I also don't expect any of those to see the light of day. To the extent to which we see any legislation related to abortion, it's likely to be on the other side, focused on placing restrictions on cities like the city of Houston or counties like Harris County from providing financial or logistical support to women seeking an abortion out of state. Now, you also mentioned the LGBTQ issues and school-related issues. There we're likely to see more symbolic legislation, such as bans on some types of gender-affirming therapy, or allowing parents to have a greater say on what's taught in the schools, and placing limits on what schools can teach in regard to sexuality at different grade levels.
Yeah, certainly a lot to talk about and discuss this morning. Mark, stick with us because we're going to be speaking back with you throughout this next half hour. We also want to focus on some key public safety issues that lawmakers are expected to tackle this session.
That's right. KPRC 2's Rowan Belogan live in Austin looking at one bill that would target catalytic converter thieves. Rowan, we know this has been a huge problem here in Houston, at least the last couple years.
Lisa, Andy, good morning. That's right. People are fed up with this happening nonstop, it appears, and we've covered this numerous times. I want to show you some numbers. Taking a look, like this is not just some theory that people are having an issues. There's hard data that comes up with this. This is information from Houston Police. They show, you can see that jump between 2020 and 2021, nearly a 7,000 increases of reported catalytic converter thefts. And as through November of this last year, 8,969. Now, I spoke with HPD about these numbers, and they said while that number is high for the totality of what they have for last year, they said there was a downward trend from August until leading into December. So they're hopeful that this is an issue that is receding, but lawmakers are hoping to put some teeth really into the laws on the books at this point. And it all stems from a gruesome death that happened last year in the Houston area. There's a renewed focus on this after the death of Deputy Darren Almendarez, who was off duty when he was killed trying to stop 3 suspects from stealing his catalytic converter. This happened back in March, and shortly thereafter, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who's the president of the state Senate, really put a task to the criminal justice committee, that is, to really look into the laws around catalytic converters and trying to figure out what more they can do to prevent stuff like this from happening in the future. And on our drive here from Houston to Austin, photojournalist Damon Sales and I were really talking about some of the things we've heard from law enforcement sources over through the years. They say right now, if someone is convicted or caught with stealing catalytic converter, what typically happens is they're charged for the theft of the catalytic converter, and not necessarily the money that it takes for a driver that they'll have to fix that theft. So these catalytic converters cost up to, let's say, about $200, but replacing that for a driver could cost thousands of dollars. So we posed this question directly to State Senator John Whitmire, who's the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, to ask him if anything can change about this, to change that cost from low as $200 to really go to the $3,000 that these drivers are typically having to fork out of their own wallets and purses themselves. Take a listen as to what he had to say.
The replacement is $3,000. The constituent that had theirs stolen in their driveway the other day, and that's just the cost. That's not the, not being able to go to work or school. Most folks, a lot of folks I represent, do not have a backup automobile. Certainly single moms, so they don't have money set aside. They don't have a backup car. So yeah, looking at the replacement value, and in fact, what would be ideal that we will suggest that you can't buy, you have to purchase new ones, that you can't be purchasing things that they've gotten off of the street. Insurance companies need to get involved. It's very expensive it has a tremendous ripple effect. But the safety part of it scares me to death, in that if you come upon them doing it, if you don't immediately back off, they will shoot you.
So there's really a lot that we'll go into with this committee looking more into catalytic converter thefts throughout this session. We'll be following that and a lot more throughout this legislative session. Andy, Lisa.
So, Ro, on that same committee also plans to tackle another public safety measure, bail bonds. So tell us about that proposal.
That's right. They're looking at the requirements right now. Any bail bonds company can really pick between 1% or 10% as to requirements for a suspect to have to pay before they're released back on the street. Senator Whitmire said that they're really looking at trying to require, meaning put it into law that will require folks to pay the 10% necessary before they are released back out into the streets here after they're charged with something. So this is a story KPRC 2 Investigates had looked into for a while. So this is also a story we'll be following through this session to see what, if anything, comes out of it. Andy?
Lots to keep tabs on. Rowan Balogan live in the state's capital for us. Thank you.
All right, we want to bring back in political analyst Mark Jones with Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. So, Mark, already there's been a wave of bills targeting gender-affirming health care. Republican Representative Steve Toth of the Woodlands filed a bill to criminalize it. In February of last year, Attorney General Ken Paxton issued a non-binding legal opinion that basically equated it with child abuse, which then prompted Governor Abbott to direct the state's child welfare agency to investigate parents. Those investigations largely blocked by court order. If the law changes, what will we see happen?
That's one of the tricky parts of the legislative session. We know there's going to be some legislation focused on transgender children, either in terms of gender-affirming care or in terms of parental custody or in terms of education. What's not clear is exactly how extensive it will be. I think if we sort of look at different scenarios, the maximum scenario we could see is a passage of legislation which equates seeking gender-affirming care for a child to affirm a sex that's opposite from their biological sex as a form of child abuse, which would affect both parents as well as practitioners providing that care coverage. At the other end, we may simply see some restrictions placed on what schools can teach related to sexuality through different grades and providing parents with more autonomy and ability to control what their children are taught in related to gender identity and sexuality throughout their time in public schools.
And Mark, speaking about the classroom, 2 Houston Democrats have filed legislation pushing for more inclusion of ethnic studies in schools, mandating that public schools offer Mexican American and African American studies. What do you anticipate happening there?
I mean, that's sort of, if you were thinking about sort of the culture wars, that's another side of the culture wars. I think it's pretty unlikely that that legislation is going to pass, even if it would somehow get out of the Texas House, which is doubtful, but not impossible. It would most likely be blocked in the Texas Senate.
All right, Mark Jones, and we were going to check back in with you for sure to get your final thoughts before we wrap this up. So stick with us. We'll be back with you shortly.
There are also a number of issues the KPRC2 Investigates team will be tracking this session, looking for answers and accountability for you.
KPRC2 investigator Mario Diaz is also live in Austin covering the start of the session for us. So Mario, the reliability of the power grid has to be one of the biggest questions that folks have, especially coming off the February 2021 freeze and even our Arctic weather this past Christmas.
That's right, Andy. It is without a doubt one of the biggest issues. In fact, I just spoke to this guy about it a few minutes ago. Hey, Senator, how you doing? Take care. About the power grid and about property taxes. Let me just first, though, give you some flavor here. We're in the Senate side of the Capitol. Let me give you some flavor here because we're still about 20 minutes away from swearing in. They're going to be doing it right here. We're going to keep the shot open here really fast. This is the Senate chamber. You can see they're going to open it up there. That's where they're going to be doing the swearing in of the Texas senators here at high noon. The House will be doing its swearing in on the other side of the Capitol. And of course, they're going to be getting to work, but not right away on the issues that you're talking about, Andy, because today is the swearing in process. Next Wednesday is when the governor will be, or next week, I should say, is when the governor will be sworn in. And that's officially when people will start to really get to work up here at the Capitol. So some of the key legislation that's going to be worked on that we discussed is the grid. I think everyone is in agreement on that from people I've been talking to on both sides of the aisle. They realize the grid is significant because no one wants to see the failure that we saw 2 years ago. Now, we did see the grid hold well during the Christmas break there when we had the freezes dump down again into the teens. But I'm hearing, again, from both sides here, that more work needs to be done. How does that happen? Well, according to one senator I spoke to on the Republican side, they said we need to have more energy generation here in the state of Texas to help protect us. On the Democratic side, they're like, we just need to get it fixed. We know there's the issue. We tried to address it in the past. We have the ability now to really go in there and get legislation done that will bolster the state's grid system, because if that goes down, the entire state goes down, and that's the issue that they feel impacts the state greater than any other at this moment. Keep in mind, you're looking at a legislative session in which just yesterday the state controller announced that they have $188 million in revenue from the last biennium. Big word, but that means the last 2 years, okay? So they have this incredible windfall of revenue of $188 million, and on top of that, you have a $32 billion surplus from the previous 2 years that they're now looking at and saying, hey, what are we gonna do with this extra money? And that's where you're gonna see the issue of the grid, taking some of that money and pushing it into that particular issue of bolstering the grid. And that is something, again, that every person I have spoken to here in the Capitol yesterday as well as this morning, I've spoken to insiders as well as elected officials. They're all saying that is a primary issue that needs to get addressed properly over the course of this cycle.
All right, Mario Diaz live for us inside of our state Capitol building. Certainly a lot to cover, and a lot of attention during the 88th session is going to be focused on the energy here in the state.
That's right. Mario, thank you.
And then,
go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
I was going to just say, I was going to add, no, that's okay. I was going to add that the other issue, and I was expecting that we might go into the property tax, and I think we have that time here. We're going to talk about property tax also, because I mentioned that $32 billion windfall that they have with regards to the controller that they announced yesterday, the surplus. They're expecting that to go into property tax relief. That is the other issue that I see both sides discussing. But keep in mind, this is politics. You have one side of the aisle and you have the other. And what we have seen here in recent years nationwide are the parties going further apart. So I spoke to two senators from our area, Senator Boris Miles from the 13th District and Senator Paul Bettencourt. We're going to start with Boris Miles, and I'm just talking to him specifically about the two sides working together and finding common ground. Here's what Senator Miles had to say. Both sides are divided. Yeah. I was talking with someone last night about this, talking about specifically where do we stand as a legislature in terms of the two parties from a decade ago. He said we're much further apart. Your assessment?
I would agree with whoever told you that. We're much further apart. There used to be a time we can come in this building and agree to disagree, and we did that and kept the ball moving. Now, with democracy being taken out of the process and more of a dictatorship environment in here, it makes it hard, very hard, to sit down with my counterparts on the other side of the aisle and negotiate and work things out for the betterment of both our communities.
Senator, those are strong words. You just said a dictatorship.
It's very much like a dictatorship feel around here.
How is common ground found?
Common ground is found by understanding that we're all human beings, that just like some of my Republican colleagues have to go back and answer to their constituents, we would like to bring something back to our Democratic constituents. You know, the have and the have-nots, not just in this state, but in this country, is getting wider and wider, Mario. And we've got to find a way to slow that down and bring it back together.
And that there from Senator Boris Miles. We now want to go to the other side of the aisle. A few minutes after that, I spoke with Senator Paul Bettencourt about the very same topic. Here's what he had to say. In the Senate side of the Capitol now with Senator Paul Bettencourt, democracy. Both sides are further apart than ever. It's not just here, but it's in the rest of the nation. How do you guys come together for this session?
Well, the Texas Senate is a place that actually works together. We still eat lunch in the same lunchroom. We talk to each other. We pass mostly nonpartisan bills, property tax relief, et cetera. So we can get things done when everything is a logjam in Washington. The Texas Senate can still operate.
But the House obviously is a divided place. You're in the Senate, but how does it, the overall scope, because you do intermix with House representatives, how does the overall atmosphere here come closer together to help benefit Texas?
Well, look, it's just like the two propositions the public voted on in May for property tax relief. They passed 85, 87%, and actually those bills passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. So when you have the right public policy, you can get unanimous votes in the Texas legislature. That may not happen federally, but it does happen here in Texas.
So from what I'm hearing is that if it's a policy that impacts folks in Clear Lake or in Spring or on the east side of the city, in the 5th Ward, if everyone's on board, those are the type of bills that you find more compromise with than you do with the others.
Sure, Acres Home to River Oaks, however you want to just express it, when you're doing real things for real people, like property tax relief, I get a lot of support for those bills, and we'll have that support this year as well.
How much forward do you look for? How excited are you about working with your colleagues?
Well, we only had a year off because we actually were in session more than the federal Congress was in 2021, but everybody looks to be in pretty good mood today, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, if you recall, they had special sessions back last year, which did extend things into the fall. But you can see both sides excited about what's on the horizon here. But there is that issue of making sure that everyone can get along to find common ground. Again, swearing in is about to take place here in the Senate, the Texas Senate, at the top of the hour, high noon. Fitting that they are doing it at high noon. We are, after all, state of Texas. I want to show you also how close they are to one another. This is Senator Boris Miles' office here. Again, Senator Miles is with District 13. Hey, Gary, how you doing? Good to see you again, Gary. There's Justin Miles. That's Senator Miles' son. I mentioned, of course, about today being Family Day here because you have a lot of members of family members who are showing up for the swearing in. That's Boris Miles' office, okay? Right over here is where you have Senator Paul Bettencourt's office. He's the chair of Committee on Local Government for this cycle. You see how close they are. They're talking a lot behind the scenes here, not just on the floor. They're talking a lot behind the scenes, and they're close to one another. They understand it. You have a relationship here in Austin with the Senate that is much closer than you do with regard to the House. The House is much more divided, and of course you saw that the last time around when the House Democrats took off to D.C. in July of 2021. So it will be interesting to see how the dynamics are and if there's any bad blood still from what took place in the summer of last year. Again, the swearing in takes place at high noon. The governor gets sworn in next week. So there won't be much work taking place until he's officially sworn in. What you're going to see behind the scenes, everyone basically preparing themselves. They're going to be examining their bills, basically putting the final touches on the bills they plan to introduce right away. But during the legislative session, you have bills that will suddenly appear in the middle of it. And then those bills will also get a look. So just because we're starting early on and you might not see something that's out there, keep in mind, in the Texas legislature, you have the ability to swing in some bills there in the middle or near the end that obviously will gain a lot of momentum and ultimately will get passed. But that's the very latest here in the Senate Capitol. Back to you, Andy and Lisa.
Yeah, a lot of work to get done on behalf of the people of the great state of Texas. Mario Diaz live for us inside our state's capital this morning. Thank you.
And we do want to check back in with Rice University's Mark Jones now, who's been going over some of the big items of the day, of the session for us today.
Mark, before we let you go, I want to talk about the battle over renewable energy. Some Republican lawmakers have filed bills that would make building renewable energy facilities more difficult, including the location of where some of these facilities can be built. How do you see that playing out?
Oh, well, there's a continual struggle between fossil fuels and renewables. I don't see that legislation going much anywhere except for perhaps giving landowners a little more rights than they presently have. We are going to see, though, I think a big push using some of that $33 billion surplus, one-time surplus, to switch away from renewables and go towards fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, electric generation, to provide incentives for companies to secure the grid and provide that type of backup security so that we don't have problems like we had back in 2021 or concerns like we had over the holidays.
Mark, you know, we love to pick your brain, and if we could have you for another 12 hours straight through, we'd do it. We're not going to do that to you today, but anything else you want to add about today that we didn't already ask you about?
I think one thing, since most legislation, unless it's under the governor's emergency items or it has unanimous support or near unanimous support, can't be discussed into March. One thing that's going to occupy a lot of time during these first few weeks is how to deal with that $33 billion surplus. And you're going to have a host of different groups out there with their hands out, lobbyists working, trying to get their share, whether it's for mental health hospitals, whether it's for the University of Houston and Texas Tech University, rural sheriffs, power plant generation. There's certainly, as I think Senator Betancourt mentioned, going to be a real push to increase the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $60,000. But that's going to be one of the real areas where people are going to be focused during this first time because everyone wants a piece of that pie. And it's a level of money that most people believe is not going to come around again anytime soon.
All right, Mark Jones, political analyst, Rice University, Baker Institute. Your insight, your perspective, always greatly appreciated. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us for this live extended coverage of the 88th Texas Legislature on the KPRC 2 Plus live stream.
And we'll help you stay on top of developments throughout the session right here on KPRC 2 Plus, on KPRC 2 TV, and on click2houston.com.
KPRC 2 News at noon is next.